All right, we'll go over the what I would say the most pivotal point of baling is, and that's the hay baler, right? You've done all the other things we've talked about, done them correctly. Now it's time to put it in the bale, put it in a good tight bale that can be hauled, that can be fed effectively, and get it in the barn. I'd say, you know, you cannot afford during this process to have a baler go down, right? This is very important. You've got a very narrow time to get that hay in the bale, get it in the barn, whether the rain's coming, whether the moisture's right, whatever it may be. You know, you can't. I don't believe you can take a shortcut on having a baler that's not up to par or is you know, needs work on it or whatever that is. I would encourage you not to take shortcuts on your baler, right? Make sure it is ready to go, it's ready to perform, and when it's time to put that hay up, have it ready to go. We'll go over the round baler real quick. There's different types of round balers out there on the market. I was talking to a gentleman earlier. He's familiar with old Alice baler, right? One of the first ones. So they've come a long ways over the years, but he was telling me, you know, some of the geometry in there is still the same, and that's true, but there's a lot of things that have changed and here recently continue to change on them, especially with haylage, balage, silage, whatever you want to call it, becoming more and more popular. And it's important to realize that when you're talking about a round baler, there is a distinct difference between a dry hay machine and a haylage or silage baler, okay? If, you know, we get the question all the time, well, I would like to start, you know, I would like to start making haylage or silage or whatever it may be. Will my John Deere dry hay baler or Heston dry hay baler make a silage bale? Yeah, it probably will for a little while, and that'll be the end of that pretty quick, right? They're not built to hold up to that big of a bale and heavy of a bale. Those bearings will start giving trouble. Those chains that are not built heavy enough will start giving trouble. Your drive line, your gearboxes, things of that nature. If you look at this baler here, it is very, very heavy built. As you walk around it, I'm sure all of you have and looked at it, it is a heavy duty baler. It is built for silage. Okay, now, we're selling a lot of these balers to dry hay producers because they are built so heavy and the ability to put more hay through them and make hay quicker. They're just built so much heavier. They last longer. The bearings are heavier duty. The chains are heavier duty. The drive lines are heavier. So we're seeing a lot of them go into dry hay. But just understand that there is a difference between a silage baler and a dry hay baler, and you need to think about that depending upon your operation. The silage balers all now have a feed rotor in them. So when you come around and look at this one, on the inside right here, you will see a big feed rotor, and basically what that does is help get that heavy crop into the bale, and also with the knife bank option on this baler, it will bring it across those knives if you want to cut your balage or even dry hay. And I'll let Nick talk a little bit about the advantage of cutting your hay or silage.
Yeah. So we get questioned on why would you cut dry hay? Why would you want knives in a dry hay machine? Well, number one, I want knives in a dry hay machine because that means the floor is probably droppable, and that way I don't have to get down there and dig it out. So like this one is hydraulically droppable from the cab, so we can lower that floor and to clear that plug. But to go back to knives, we have, is any of you feeding out of TMR wagons or mixer wagons or anything like that? You incorporate dry hay into your feed ration? So if you're incorporating a dry hay into your feed ration, when you do run dry hay through a machine like this and you do chop it, that drastically cuts down on your mixing time. So I see guys that are running some sort of TMR wagon and they're trying to mix rations. I mean, they're mixing and chopping for 30 minutes. I mean, it's ridiculous what it takes to get that material chopped up. You run it through here, I mean, you're cutting your mixing time down to 5 or 10 minutes literally, because you've already got it sized and it gets it down there and mixes well. The other thing is just palatability for the cattle. So when you think about that, especially an old cow, short and solid, something like that, you've got some long stemmy crop. And these balers today, most all balers, I mean, you can really crank the density down, and these things will put up an absolute brick of a bale. So it's very difficult to pull that crop or that material out of that bale. When you do size it or do chop it some, I'm not saying get it down to 1 3/4, 2 inches or something like that, but when you do size it, it makes it easier for that cow to get out of the bale. All right, so number two, it's going to make it easier on her to digest. She doesn't have that 12-inch stem of hay that's strung down her throat trying to get into her room, and then she's getting it back up and chewing on her cud. So it's easier on those cows to digest, easier on them to get into their digestive tract there. So not only is chopping hay good for silage, but it does have its advantages in dry hay. So y'all just there's a lot of research you can get out there, and a lot of people you can talk to on that. As far as this particular machine, I said something about density, right? So in order to get that hay up, we've talked about all these different steps. All right, we spent a lot of money getting this hay up on the ground. We've tried to do it in a timely manner. That way that we would preserve all of our sugars, our carbohydrates, and increase our feed value. The next thing we need to do is put that bale in as dense of a bale as we can to seal them off, so they're not going to get wet. Now, some of you may be storing in a barn, some of you may be selling it by the bale instead of by the pound. There's some variables in there, but you want that bale as dense, as tight as possible. That way, when you put the wrap on it and you do store it outside, you'll have minimum spoilage over the outside. This is kind of a caveat to this baler. We were playing with some silage. The guy had just a 30-inch row of corn, let it grow up. Man, it was a mess. He had some old hay grazer come through it, and he had orchard, he had barnyard, you name it. I mean, it was crazy. But he went in there and run it through a mower conditioner, and then we went out there with this baler, well, actually the 4x6 version of this baler. I run out of horsepower before I got the density turned all the way up. And we took the bale the next morning because we didn't have a tractor big enough to pick it up and get it out of the field. We took the bales the next morning to the scales, weighed at 2,720 pounds. When anybody tells you can't put up a heck of a bale of hay, I mean, that's one reason to go to a silage baler. Now, we do have the guys out there that's selling this by the bale, the custom balers. I'm gonna call out your secrets. You back off the density, and you're gonna let that bale squat a little bit because you're getting paid by the bale, not by the acre, not by the ton. So, but going back to the density on this thing, when you really crank those down on these round bales and you're storing them outside, you're saving a large percentage of your hay. One of the doctors was on one of the online presentations. You may have to refresh my memory. What was the percentage loss on a square bale stored outside? Do you remember offhand?
No, I don't know for square bales.
Or I'm sorry, round bales. I'm sorry.
Yeah, round bales, minimum usually 20.
20%. Did y'all hear that? That's a bale stored outside on the ground. So up to 20% loss. Okay. So then another one of the doctors talked about how much loss there was in the feed. How many of you feed round bales out in the field in hay grain, right? Now you're talking about another, up to 20% loss out there, 15 or 20% loss. Cows are not going to eat all of it. They're laying on 40 or 50% of that bale. We all know that, right? Whether you put it in a ring or not. So that's astronomical. So we talk about storage, we talk about efficiency, we talk about cheap cow hay. We talked about that earlier. There is no such thing as cheap cow hay. So we need to preserve every bit of hay, every pound of hay that we can, and that's one way of doing it, is putting up a brick of a bale, particularly if we're going to store it outside, and just sealing that hay over. So with that being said, this particular baler has net wrap on it. So we're seeing the way of the world move towards net wrap. We still have some guys that run string out there. The string guys, they don't want string because they don't want to have to get off the tractor and cut the net off when they feed the hay. You get further north, up north, the guys don't want to get off in the middle of winter if it's stored outside and break the ice and break the snow off of it, then try to cut the net off of it. So net has its advantages. It is going to greatly increase the storage life of the bale, particularly stored outside, because it's going to shed the water off and all. But string has its advantages. There are some people that still want to stick with it. As far as the mesh goes, the mesh is really going to, when you're looking at balers, look for a baler that's really going to put that mesh on tight on the outside. You want that outside layer to be extremely tight when it goes on. The center of the bale's always got a really good core to it. It's a tangled up mess sometimes. You run up there and hit it with your fist, you feel like you're hitting a tree on some of them. But that outside foot, which is the majority of your material in a round bale, that outside foot's pretty loose. You can run your hand up in there that far, right? So you want something that's going to get that net on there extremely tight to seal that over. Now, there's some of you guys that's going to throw rocks at me and sticks at me and run me off when I talk about cover edge or over edge wrap. So do some experimenting with that. So yes, we sell a 51-inch wrap. We sell a wrap that goes over the side. We sell a wrap that goes to edge. So if you're stacking hay end to end out in the hay field, and you've got over the edge wrapped, and you butt them up, what do you just create? You created a channel for all that water running off, right? So you just created a channel for that water to ingress or egress into that bale. All right. So I like edge to edge. When I butt that up there real tight on the turn row, I'm going to almost create a seal or a crust. That way my net's almost touching. It's arguable, I get it. So I would suggest that you go out and play with it, and try it this fall and or this summer and see what you come up with. Anything else on the?
No, you covered it there. I think, you know, to kind of wrap up the round baler spiel there, you know, the next thing is just making sure you match the right tractor to your round baler. When you talk about dry hay round balers, you know, some of them you get away with 70, 80 horse tractors, but you go and buy something like this, I'm going to say 130, 120 minimum, right? Minimum horsepower, and that's pulling this baler in dry hay. You start getting into some wet hay and trying to cut it, you're going to run that horsepower on up there. And that goes with, you know, I'm not just talking Massey here, I'm talking McClelland, you know, John Deere, silage baler, things of that nature. It's very important if you're looking at going into a haylage or balage operation, or changing your operation over to that, to realize that you're going to have a bigger tractor if you don't have one capable to pull that as well. So
I just want to touch on the moisture portion there. So we do offer kits that go in these balers. They're not going to come factory. They're not going to come factory with the kits in them. But everything he said, I agree with it all the way. I see it in studies after study after study. But I would suggest y'all looking at getting some sort of moisture sensor on your baler, because we're always chasing that last hour before sunset, trying to get that hay rolled up. And it is amazing how the moisture changes in that last hour before sunset from day to day. You may be able to run for 30 minutes this day before the sun sets and your moisture not jump up. You may be able to run an hour the next day. And when we're talking about jumping 10% in the matter of, you know, an hour, that's substantial, especially when it's putting out in the barn. You know, this whole clinic that we've talked about putting up quality hay. And when we put up a hay that's got too much moisture in it, a dry hay with too much moisture, then we take the risk on mold, right? So, you know, and other things going on with the hay, the fire, as he talked about, physical damage and things like that. So, you know, the small input costs pay dividend at the end when we actually put pencils to them.
well, I'm sure everyone's probably seen the Heston or Massey Ferguson inline small square baler running in a field somewhere. It's by far the most popular design out there. New Holland and John Deere both make a side delivery type, where the pickup is off to that side of the tractor, and the hay comes in, makes a 90-degree turn, right turn, and then through the plunger. This design, straight up through the pickup, straight into the plunger, and straight out the back. So that helps us with a really nice uniform square bale in the Massey inline square baler. Good dense bale. The way we adjust the density is there's a hydraulic pump right over here. We crank that dial down, and then that hydraulic cylinder will put more or less pressure on that bale as it comes out, and tightens, gets you a tighter bale.
I'll do my best to bend it wide here.
Yeah, there you go. Then bell length adjustment, that's right here. We just, as the bell comes out, that star wheel right there turns, and then it would trip into tie mode, it would tie, and then the next one would be right after that. I'm going to say, you know, minimum PTO horsepower requirements, probably a minimum of 40. Now I'm telling you, you don't want to do that, because you put a 40 horsepower tractor in front of this thing and that plunger going back and forth all day, you will sit there and do this all day long. So I would say a 70 horse tractor, something like that, 4710 or this Deere right here are about right for a small square baler.
So Zach touched on the inline design. So just one thing that you will not get out of an inline design baler is a banana shaped bale. All right. So we've all went out and picked up a bale and put it against her thigh or put it against her leg here. What happened? It kicked out, right? So with a side delivery baler, you're pulling the crop up, you're moving the crop over, and then the plunger, or I'm sorry, not the plunger, but the knives are coming down and grabbing. You know, your pickup knives are coming out. So when you're moving that crop sideways, you run a high risk of not having an even flake across the side of it, right? An even density flake, because you're pulling the crop this way. With an inline design, the hay comes up the pickup, right into, and the knives or the fingers pick it up, they pull it up into basically, I would call it a pre-chamber, right? So they're gonna pick it up, and the plunger is gonna hit it and push it in. So you've got a consistent amount of crop coming in and moving up into a pre-chamber, and a plunger going forward. So that's what Zach was referring to, that consistent length bale. With a little inline design baler like this, you will be hard pressed to find anything that will compete with it on the market. They put up little bricks every time. When you set that thing to 42 inches and X amount of pounds, and you get out there and you got a good windrow and you can keep its mouth full and keep consistent ground speed, you're going to get a very consistent length bale out of it that's going to partner up really good with the accumulators and all that go behind them. So the other thing with the inline design is roading. So up north, it's getting worse and worse all the time. We are constantly redesigning equipment just simply to get down the roadways up there. There are more regulations and everything coming out all the time on roading equipment further north, up in the northern Midwest and stuff like that. So even down here, you get your narrower 2-lane blacktop roads and all like that, and you're trying to move from field to field. There's none of the swinging in and swinging out, plus the baler is going to be running directly behind you. You do have an accumulator, it's also running directly behind you, so easy getting in and getting out. But the advantages of square balers, as y'all know, is it's easy to get them out of the field. Help's really easy to find, right? Everybody's wanting to work. Yeah. So we partner with several manufacturers that make accumulators back here. I joked a while ago that the guys with the square balers are where the money's at, but in all actuality, I'm going to go back to what I was talking about earlier. There is no such thing as cheap cow hay, right? We're all out there selling that stuff for $30 and $35 a row for 4 by 5 rows. Like we're making a killing, we're losing money, right? So here we're getting a little bit more out of it a lot of times, and then we're hitting the feed stores with it, things like that. So from a producer standpoint, that's what I would, that quality hay here is, that's what we're looking at. Zach talked about the plunger strokes. So this particular baler is 100 plunger strokes a minute. So what that means is that plunger running at 540 is going to make a flake of hay every, 100 flakes of hay every minute. We're shooting for 13 to 15 flakes of hay per bale, right, on average. So why did we pull that number out of there, right? Well, because the equine people, they like that little flake of hay. They want to go out there and grab that ration to feed your horse, right? So that's kind of where that comes from when we're looking for that flake of hay. But we're shooting for 13 to 15 flakes. But that, you can also put a stroke counter on these to maximize them. Again, if you want a consistent bale out of a baler like this, I don't care if it's side delivery, inline, or what, but you've got to keep the hay fed to them, right? Keep them full, keep plenty of hay going into the chamber.
Good, consistent windrow, and listen, get your stroke count right, match your ground speed to get 13, 14 strokes per bale in there, and you won't have a problem out of these.
And put a rotary rake in front of it.
Yep, rotary rake is key with these.
If you want to gain efficiency out of a square baler, again, I don't care what color it is, if you want to gain efficiency out of a square baler, put some sort of driven rake, not ground driven, some sort of driven rake that's going to make a fluffy windrow, right? So not only was it aiding in drying down, it's going to increase that dry down period, it's going to give us a better quality hay at the end of the day. It's also going to improve efficiency here. It's not only going to improve it here, it's going to improve it on your round baler too. So we've all done it. We pulled up there to stop the bale, and there's 4 foot of hay that goes ahead and comes in the pickup even after we got stopped, because it's all roped together with a B-type rake. So we're going to gain ground speed there, definitely.